God, our refuge and hope, when race, status, or gender divide us, when despondency and despair haunt and afflict us, when community lies shattered, comfort and convict us with the stillness of your presence, that we may confess all you have done through Christ, to whom we belong, and in whom we are one. Amen.
I want to talk about the troubling truth about God's grace and our drama. 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 Anybody know anything about drama? Anybody know anything about living with drama? Drama in the world. Drama in the neighborhood, drama at work, drama at school, drama in the house, drama in us. Hello? Anybody know anything about drama? We constantly need to be reminded about God's grace and the power of God's grace as we deal with the realities of our drama. Because we constantly meet situations where the power of oppressive evil afflicts people. We constantly have to deal with situations where the only thing we can do is admit that we live in a world where drama happens. Because oppressive power happens. And we cannot say because we love God, we get a pass from drama. I need to say it again. Just because you love God does not mean you and I are going to get a drama pass. And in this lesson about Jesus healing a tormented man that we are encountering today, we receive another reminder about the power of God's grace to liberate people from the power of oppressive evil and the drama that oppressive evil happens. Now, let me be clear. I'm not talking about the drama that happens because I didn't pay my car payment on time. Okay? That's not the kind of drama I'm talking about. You know, if I don't pay my electric bill on time and the lights get turned off, that's not the kind of drama I'm talking about. That's consequences. Hello? Let's not get it twisted. Let's not confuse drama and consequences. Okay? If you go to the supermarket and you go to checkout line and you do not have your wallet, that's not drama. The anxiety you have then is consequences of having left your wallet. If anybody ever had done that, you know that you can't say evil did that to me, the devil did it. No. That's don't put that on the devil. You can't pray that away. I forgot my wallet. Put the stuff back. Go to the house. No, don't confuse drama and consequences. What we're dealing with in this text is the power of oppressive evil, of something that is bigger than normal consequences, bigger than ordinary realities of cause and effect. This is oppressive evil. You know the story. Jesus and his closest followers had taken a boat across the Sea of Galilee, and actually in this 8th chapter, we have 2 storm lessons. There are 2 storm lessons. You recall the one where Jesus is going across the water and the storm comes up and he has to calm the storm. That's the first storm lesson. But this next lesson, the one we're reading about now, comes right after that. It's as if, okay, you get out of one storm and you get to dry land and you're saying, thank you, Jesus. And as soon as you get on dry land, this is what happens. Jesus meets a fellow who is a storm unto himself. He's a human tornado. I mean, he is a human hurricane. And this man is a tormented fellow who fits almost any definition of what it means to be an outcast. He was a social outcast. His family couldn't deal with him. His neighbor couldn't deal with him. They tried to tie him up. They couldn't lock him up. They couldn't keep him tied down. Nobody could reason with him. The church folk had given up on him. The police had given up on him. He had broken loose from everything that constrained him, and now he was living not in a house. Walls could not hold him in. Doors couldn't hold him in. Locks couldn't hold him. He was living in the wild. He was living in the tombs, according to verse 827. And when Jesus asked the man his name, the man couldn't even give him his right name. He carried Legion. The narrative as, the commentary is, for many demons had entered him. This is the one time in the Bible where we see Jesus dealing with not just one demon, but many. It's enough if you deal with one person who's messed up, but deal with many messed up people in the same body. That's drama. That's drama. And so the issue is, in that situation, how in the world do we reconcile the grace of God? How do we square the grace of God with so much evil that none of the usual things we say control people work? Because evil powers are real. Evil forces are real. Evil powers and evil forces have real impacts on people, and these impacts oppress people. They create drama. They torment people. They terrorize people. They threaten our sense of peace. Evil power and evil forces become so oppressive, we sometimes lose our sense of hope. We dare even wonder, can I ever be delivered from this? Is there any way out? And this lesson teaches us that evil powers don't just operate separately. These evil powers came together. You know, we think that, okay, if I run into evil force here, I can deal with this one. But we forget what this lesson teaches. Sometimes evil stuff, like storm clouds, come together and it gathers around us. And in this man's life, all of these stormy forces, all these demonic forces, all these evil forces gathered together and terrorized, tormented this one fellow. He wasn't dealing with one problem. He had a bunch of them. Anybody know anything about having a bunch of problems at the same time? This episode happened in Gentile territory. It happened with a man who was an outcast in every sense of the word. It happened as a way of showing us a preview. This lesson actually is a preview to Acts. You understand, Luke wrote Acts. And it's a preview to Acts because it shows how the Spirit of God actually has power over the forces of evil, even when we don't think we can do anything about it. Because understand, everybody had thrown up their hands. This guy was just wild. We giving him up? Folks have stopped praying for him. Church folks stopped visiting him. Nobody invited him home for dinner. Nobody wanted to have him around. Folks stopped talking to him. They talked about him. Nobody wanted to admit they were kin to him. Nobody wanted him to be in their neighborhood. Nobody invited him to their parties. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with him, and he was just out there. You know people who are just out there? Yeah, you do. There you do. You see them. We call them homeless people, don't we? We call them street people, don't we? We call them people who are addicted, don't we? We call them incarcerated people, don't we? We call them folks that we have said, no. They're just out there. We don't invite them to church. And this lesson says, hey, the power of God's grace extends even to that community. It extends to people we call homeless, incarcerated, dysfunctional, disturbed, off, who don't have themselves together, who don't wear the right kind of clothes, who don't wear the right kind of body perfume, who don't look like we think they're supposed to look, who don't show up right in our minds. The power of God's grace in Jesus didn't stop him at the point of feeling sorry, because a lot of times all we do is feel sorry for him. But that's not where Jesus stopped. Notice Jesus went to him. I think you missed it. I think you missed it. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee through a storm and wound up to go see this man. To go see the man nobody else wanted to have anything to do with. To go see the man that nobody else claimed. To go see the man that was out of control. I think you missed it. He went to see the people that we don't want in church. Jesus went to take the church, the power of God, to the people that the church folks were not seeing. And there we notice something. Jesus didn't say, I feel sorry for you. Jesus said, what is your name? Jesus, I want to know you. I want to get to know you. I don't want to give you a name. I don't want to give you a label. I don't want to call you off. I want to know who you really are. And the man says, I don't know who I am. I'm so messed up, I can just tell you about my condition. I can just tell you about my addiction. I can tell you about my record. I can tell you about my history. I have so much issues going on me, I can't tell you who I am anymore. And there it was. Jesus is having to deal with this fella that nobody else is dealing with, and this fella is having to deal with the fact that Jesus is owning that. I don't know who it is, but I'll preach anyway. You read the story. The demon-possessed fellow confronted Jesus, and the demons recognized Jesus. The demons recognize Jesus. They say, who you? They want to know, what are you going to do with us? We know who you are. What we really want to know is, what are you going to do with us? Because, see, we're at home here. We're content here. And we realize you didn't show up to leave us here. So what are you going to do with us? The demons recognized the power of God's grace was stronger than their power in the man, and they couldn't stay in the man as long as Jesus was in the presence of the man, and so they realized they had to go. And so we read what is the only gospel account of a conversation between Jesus and demons. Jesus and the demons have a conversation. Check that out. Can you imagine the Lord having a conversation with demons? Don't think strange about it. Don't think strange about it. Sometimes God is the only person who can deal with the stuff in our lives. And so if God doesn't deal with the stuff we're creating our drama, nobody does. Don't worry about the fact that God has a conversation with you. Be worried that you don't have people who have the presence of God willing to have the conversation. We read in verse 31, the demons begged Jesus not to order them to go back into the abyss. In ancient Middle Eastern thought, there was the view that evil spirits couldn't survive in water. If you go to Luke 11 and 24, Jesus describes demons as inhabiting waterless regions. There was this old thought that demons couldn't survive in water. So the word we read here in this text is that Jesus permitted the demons to enter the herd of swine. And the demons are, we're good now. We gone from the man to the pine, and then the swine go into the lake. Boom. If they couldn't survive in water, all of a sudden they're gone. Boom, right? With that, the tormented man is delivered. He is healed. And the price for his deliverance was a herd of swine. Let me let you think about that for a moment. The price for his deliverance was a herd of swine. And when the people who were herding the swine heard about what had happened, told what had happened to their herd, their investment had gone down. You understand? Now they're out of a job. You check it? If your business is herding swine and the swine have been possessed by demons and the demons have driven the swine over the cliff and they drowned, guess what? All of a sudden, in one day, you're unemployed. And so they went back to town and told folks, there's a fella out there putting us out of work. This is the Griffin paraphrase. We had a good job working for the police force. Herding swine. We had a good job herding swine. We had a good job racially profiling, herding swine. We had a good job beating up on folks, herding swine. We had a good job working as prison guard, herding swine. And all of a sudden, this fella has healed a guy so that we are now out of work. So you see what happened? The people in the neighborhood came back to check it out. Is this true? And they found the man who had been out of control and naked, clothed, properly dressed, and in his, in other words, like we want folks to act, right? This ought to be the hallelujah time, right? This is where you have the praise the Lord time, right? This is where you say, hey, look what God can do. This is why the sermon is titled The Troubling Truth About God's Grace in Our Drama, because here's the troubling truth. There wasn't a hey moment there. The troubling truth is that's when the folks said, Jesus, you got to go. Check this out now. Now, this man has been tormenting the neighborhood. He has been the cause of all kind of confusion. Nobody can deal with him. Nobody wants him around. Nobody has been able to do anything for him. And now he is clothed and in his right mind. And instead of saying, we bless the Lord and want to have Jesus around all the time so more healing can happen, you got to quit this. Because you're bad for our business. We're in the swine herding business, and if you turning demons out and they go into the swine, it's going to rise up the price of pork sausage. Pork chops going to go up. It's going to be hard to get chitlins. If the demons are overtaking the swines, we're not going to have barbecue, ribs. So the barbecue folks are mad. The butchers are mad. The farmers are mad. And meanwhile, the brother is clothed and in his. Do you see the problem? Yes, sir. All of a sudden, this man's worth, this man's dignity, this man's sanity, this man's deliverance is not viewed as worth the loss of folks' business. Folks said, I would rather have my business with this man crazy than to know business and he's sane. Have you ever thought what would happen if we didn't have 2.6 million people in prison? If we didn't have 2.6 million people in prison, have you ever thought about the number of folks who would not have? Let's think about it. Let's see. How many prison guards? How many prisons would have to close? How many prison laundries would close? How much money you wouldn't spend on prison phone calls? The highest phone calls you ever make are to a prison. Attorneys, bail bonds persons, probation officers have to get another line of work, wouldn't we? Can we admit that a whole lot of our business is earned off of the drama of evil? And can we admit that one of the troubling lessons we see in this text is that the community was more comfortable with having the drama of evil and the business than having the presence of Jesus? You would think you'd want to have Jesus around. But the text says they begged Jesus, would you please go? Please. We don't want to give you the key to the city. Please, bye. We're putting you out of town. Catch the boat you came over here on and leave. Don't come back. Now, where does that fit us? Do you recall that during the civil rights era, nobody wanted Martin Luther King to come to town? Because you see, the forces of segregation and discrimination were happy with business as usual, were happy with the oppression of discrimination. During the time when women were not allowed to vote, nobody wanted to have Susan B. Anthony come to town and talk about giving women the right to vote. Because men were very happy having the power of having all the political votes. The lesson here is that we are comfortable. We get comfortable. Even people who say we love God get comfortable with evil. So much so that we are willing to have the evil present more so than to have the presence of God and the presence of God's grace, because that's what Jesus was. Jesus was the presence of God's grace walking around. God's grace walking around. God's grace healing people. God's grace delivering people. God's grace lifting people. And they say, we want the grace of God to leave. We would rather have our stuff. We would rather have our business. We'd rather have the things the way they used to be. Make America great again. Excuse me. We'd rather have this thing we used to have. And this is where we encounter the troubling truth about God's grace in our drama. How strange that this community tolerated the presence of the demon-possessed man for so long, but they were unwilling to tolerate the presence of Jesus. How strange that they were more upset about the loss of a herd of swine than they were pleased by the presence of God's grace. How strange that we are more interested in personal wealth than the worth of our brothers and sisters. How strange that people are more willing to tolerate the evils of air pollution and soil pollution and water pollution than the health of folks. You understand, we are killing ourselves with the stuff we are making because we're putting stuff in the air and the water that makes us sick and die. And we would rather have the stuff that makes us sick and die because it makes other people money. And so we would rather have the continued money than to have the presence of God's grace. Says it's wrong to have this stuff going on. People have been willing, this lesson teaches that people have been willing to tolerate evil presence. A lot of my family's relatives are from Michigan. You know what? The folks were willing to tolerate the leaded pipes. Willing to tolerate the poison water in Flint. And Jackson, Mississippi's got the same situation now. Willing to tolerate it rather than to have the presence of truth. So when you read this text, read where we are. Interesting thing, Jesus left. Jesus left. God's grace does not stay where God's grace is not welcomed. Stay there. Stay there. Sometimes stuff is bad drama for us because we have not welcomed the drama deliverance of God's grace among us. There are some things that happen in our lives because we do not welcome deliverance. You heard the story about the fellow who was in a flood, and the flood waters came by, and he prayed for deliverance, and the boat came by, and he said, "No, I'm waiting for the Lord to come get me." And the boat went on past, and a helicopter came by and said, "No, I'm waiting for the Lord to come get me," waved the boat off. And then the flood got him. And he goes into the afterlife. He said, "Lord, I thought you were going to get me." He said, I sent the boat, and I sent the helicopter, and you waved them off. You didn't drown because you didn't have deliverance. You drowned because you waved off the deliverance. And a lot of times we wave off the deliverance. Jesus left because the grace of God does not stay where the grace of God is not welcome. But here's the interesting thing. When the man who had been healed wanted to go with Jesus, Jesus told him, "You can't go." Wait a minute. Jesus went all through his life telling people, "Follow me, follow me, follow me." Here, he tells man, "You cannot follow me." What's up with Jesus? What's up with Jesus? Why would Jesus break his protocol? Why didn't Jesus consent to the man's request? Jesus, listen, if you are not here, I don't want to stay here either. I know these people. I've been around these people when I was crazy. I got good sense now. I sure don't want to be around them now. No. I was around them when I was crazy, but now I got good sense, and they don't want you around. Listen, they crazy. I don't want to be around them. Take me with you, please. That man had good reason to be uneasy about being in a community where it did not want the liberating presence of God's grace. So why didn't Jesus consent to let him come with him? One clue lies in what Jesus told the man. At verse 39, Jesus told the man to go home, return home, and declare how much God has done for you. And the narrative ends with the message that the man went away proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. Last point, liberated people are God's best evidence that God's grace works. Liberated people are the best evidence that God's grace works. Liberated people are God's best gospel proof. No. Jesus didn't come into that town carrying out tracts. I just not said something. We keep saying, hey, if we show up, we're doing evangelism, we're giving out paper. No. Jesus didn't come out. He came out handing out deliverance. Liberated people are most effective when they have been formerly oppressed, and they can say, "I once was lost, but now I am. I was blind, but now I." The persons who have once been lost are the best proof about the finding power of God. The people who have once been blind are the people who are the best proof about the seeing power of God. And when we go back to where we were lost and say, "Look what God can do," that's gospel proof. That's the best advertising for God's grace, which comes to where you and I are. We're the healed man. Yeah. Okay, so you said, no, Reverend, I have never been so crazy. I was out of my head and people couldn't control me. Yes, we have. Come on, let's be real. You and I know that there have been situations in our life where we just, we were out there. Okay? How did Paul say it? I find there's a law in me. When I would do good, evil is always present. And the good I would do, I do not. And the evil I would not do, That's what I do. Hey, don't read this text and think, he's not talking about me. Yes, this is us. Remember the Pogo cartoon? We have met the enemy and he is us. There it is. There it is. We are the liberated people. We are the people God has in this society to declare that God's grace is stronger than evil. God's grace is stronger than racism. God's grace is stronger than sexism. God's grace is stronger than greedy folks. God's grace is stronger than wicked folks. God's grace is stronger than hateful folks. God's grace is stronger than capitalism. God's grace is stronger than warmongering folks. God's grace is strong enough to deliver us. But the only way the society knows that is if we go tell it. If we leave, because we just want to go with Jesus, get away, where is the proof? It would be nice if we would do like that man did. That man went back and he said, listen, you remember me? I was the guy y'all didn't want to have to do with. But this is what God did. Look what God can do. And so I say to you and to myself, go into a hateful world as evidence of God's liberating love. Go into a fearful world as evidence of God's liberating power and boldness. Go into a hopeless and confused world as proof of God's peace. Go into a world and say, I once was, but now. And then that now is the truth that God says is the answer to our troubles. Amen.